Some of the things that they build.
We're from Group 1, I'm Victoria, we're there from Jakarta, Indonesia, and
Kasi
we
yung
have
iba ni Korea mo,
next.
social economy. Next. Saan yung
Just the lower, the bottom one.
These are our members. We have 7 minutes, but I will introduce everyone. Kathy from the BI Foundation. Please stand up.
Everybody stand up.
Yeah, so everybody from this group, please stand up. We have like 2 minutes.
Stand up.
Kathy, Dr. Supal, Rodolfo, Mylet, and Janice.
Okay.
Everyone, this is our group. I'm going to represent this group. And for the first task is to review the conference declaration. We have very minor inputs for the articulation mostly. Only on the first paragraph, we revise it into we are leaders, advocates, and stakeholders of social entrepreneurship. Because not all of us are social entrepreneurs. Some of us research institutions, some of us working to support the SEs. So that's why we put stakeholders there. And the second paragraph, words for not poorest. Someone in our group saying that poorest maybe you will find more in LDC countries in Africa. And most of Asian countries are weather, change the climate rather than weather because it's weather. And third paragraph, most of the Asian countries will not meet most of the MDGs, just articulation. Fourth paragraph, distributing wealth among the poor rather than to the poor, because that's a bit different implication. You're part of that or you're just injecting something. And fifth paragraph, bullet 1, replace the word our with SEs. So our internal external challenges is external challenges of the SEs, as well as the bullet 4, the same. And the second task is to define the objectives for the next 3 to 5 years for SEPs and support institutions. We have defined 3 objectives. First is to be able to have a common understanding of SEs and mapping of SEs in different countries. This came out as a from our discussion that there's hardly find good database mapping about SEs conditions in each country. The second one is to create national platform of SEs for information exchange. This as well from the participants in our group saying that in some countries there are already platforms but they are dispersed, and in other countries that doesn't exist. So it's important to create a platform for the SEs and the support institutions to come together to share learning, etc. And number 3 is to assess the legal and policy framework for SEs per country. I think we started this a little bit in our research at Bangladesh, Indonesia, and Filipina and India, but we need to have a more broader picture about what happens to the legal framework in each country and policy. And the second is about the outcomes that should be pursued in the building strong and vibrant learning community in the next 3 to 5 years. First is the regional social enterprise report that will include the national SE report. So it's like state of SEs, like annual state of SE. You have all the UN agencies have this kind of report, and we're quite ambitious to set this as our outcomes in the next 3 to 5 years. The second one is national platform and portal for SEs in different countries, because you have the database and baseline mapping. It's going to be more useful if you put it on a portal that everyone can access and update on regular basis. So everyone who needs the information can go through a single portal and access the data and make use of it. The third one is legal and policy reforms in favor of SE development towards poverty eradication. We want to include the poverty eradication component into all the SEs work. So it's not just SEs, but SEs for poverty reduction. Poverty eradication, we have to grammatically correct. The third one is the initiatives, just most three important for the next 1 to 2 years that we foresee that we can achieve in the 2 years time. First is the mapping of SEs as the outcomes at national level. So it will include definition and creation of portal, developing the portal. Second one is ISEA conference at the national level. And the third one is the impact measurement and monitoring workshop at the regional level, as that's one of the issues that we have discussed in these 2 days, how to measure impacts and how important is impact, including to access capital market, for instance, that we want SEs to have this kind of record, this kind of assessment, and many SEs lack of this kind of exercise within their organizations. So, yeah, that's the end of it. That's a group, 7 minutes, I hope. Thank you.
Present our outputs of our workshop number 2, which is on building strategic partnerships between SEPs and civil society. So, in our workshop, as you can see, we were only 3. From Oxfam, we had Hannah, from AIDFI, and then from BPI Foundation, we had Diane. Down. So this is our proposed changes to the draft SEAL Asia Conference Declaration. So instead of using sustainable, we are suggesting to use the word resilient in the declaration, such as resilient communities, resilient, which means bouncing back after the tragedies or disasters, since we are in a typhoon or disaster-prone areas, mostly with the environment. So it would be best to use resilient than sustainable, since sustainable is our main objectives. And then next is to engage the business sector. CSR is philanthropic, while creating shared value is more on the transformation mode. So we are mentioning innovative CSR. So on our what we are looking at is the business sector should create shared value. So on the third, on the integration of women, we need to include a gendered enterprise market. So there should be a balance between men and women. So next, for our objectives and outcomes for the next 3 to 5 years, SEP's outcomes and impact should be measured, since we see this as lacking. So we need a measurement tool in which we can also assess our impacts, or the impacts of the SEPs. And a common slogan developed to support the SE revolution. So it could be a national slogan or a common slogan which could be shared among different countries, on which we would develop in what we call the SE revolution. And then strengthen SEPs capable of scaling up, since we in the research we saw that most of them identified themselves as developing, and some of them were already at a developed stage. So the objectives or the outcome or our what we want to happen is to provide the SEPs the capability of scaling up. So important initiatives or projects, the crafting of impact measuring tools or framework for SEPs, continuous campaigns and advocacies for SEPs. So, like for example, this conference that we are looking forward again, that we have another conference next year. And the alliance of SEPs and CSOs for a common platform for scaling up. And what's also very important is the documentation on the research that is being done on SEPs for dissemination or knowledge sharing. So what's lacking is we need to have more focus on documenting all the impacts, all the researches that we are doing on the SEPs, and then disseminate this or share this information with other social enterprises. So that ends our workshop.
I will be presenting the output of the Group 3 that focus on the women economic empowerment, and the group is represented by the card MRI. Can I let the group stand? Okay, and of course with the dynamic MD Basimalai, the executive director of Dan Foundation, and our superwoman from Bangladesh, Professor Nasir. Okay, and then of course the Iron Lady of Vietnam. And of course, you have also the Superman, Indonesia. Where's my group from Indonesia? Okay. So, this is the output, and we deliberated some of the what understand the declaration.
Where's the paper? Sorry.
Yes, down. The bottom. Okay, so as we review the declaration, it's happened that we have some changes that we're going to let the committee consider. The second paragraph, it include statistics, 70% of the world's poor are women.
We need to get used to it.
And then on the fourth paragraph, we should omit the word can, because it should play important role as vehicles for creating and distributing wealth to the poor. So we have to delete can. And then on the fifth paragraph, we have to change the gender value chain to gender responsive to gender transformative. Okay. So that we have to focus on transformative, no more transactional. Next. And then we also add some in the bottom. We also include, it should be included, most marginalized and vulnerable groups such as the LGBT, people with disability, the third gender, destitutes, and people living with anxiety. So that it should be specific and responding also their needs. And then in the fourth bullet, you have to add with contributions from academic and research institutions. And then for the fifth bullet, we add a gender sensitive before value chains. Value chain. And then these are the objectives. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Most of the input is coming from Sir Dan, so if you have some questions, you can also ask Mr. Dan. Okay. And then Professor Nasser will also reinforce. Okay. So some of the objectives here is to have to map out ISEAs and identify the following types of ISEAs. There might be some existing ISEAs that we are not able to identify. Okay. And then ISEAs are doing women economic empowerment. creating network of SEs in the local, national, regional, international, and global level. And then, next objective is to ensure intergenerational leadership, especially the young women. So giving opportunity to the young women to be the next leader in the SEs. Enhance learning exchange to build capacity of SEs. Promote transformational partnership with the business sector and impact investors. And the outcomes, instead of 3, we have 5. Showcase transformational practice and will help improve the practice of other SEs. A vibrant network of SIPs advancing women's economic empowerment and gender equality as core agenda. Number 3, programs and services of SIPs should contribute to transformational changes in the lives of women in the areas of income, decision-making, shared care work, and others. Increased number of young women occupying leadership positions and SIPs. And then, there will be 10 regional partnerships that will contribute to scaling up of SIPs and facilitate impact investment. And the 3 important initiatives or projects, number 1, it's not 3, but it is 4. That is how dynamic the group is. Number 1 is regional action, research on barriers, social, cultural, religious, legal, and opportunities promoting women's economic. And number 2, initiatives, we have to develop monitoring or evaluation a tool on determining our transformational impact on women's economic empowerment. Number 3, set up local, national, regional networks of SIPs with commitment to women's economic empowerment. And the last, a learning hub on women's economic empowerment. And that is all for group 3. So again, if you have questions, they are ready to answer.
Thank you. Group 4. Engaging the state and multilateral aid.
The fair trade, PhilSen, ISEA, and others. I would like to present the engage the state and MLAs. So the objective of this is to discuss the conference declaration, and in that sense, we've come up with 7 suggestions. Letter A is with regards to the paragraph 2, to read as the growth has not benefited a large segment of the poor, especially but not limited to women, PWDs, and ITs. Letter B, so the paragraph 4 is to be read as we believe that social enterprises, particularly social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders, can play an important role as vehicle for creating and distributing wealth to the poor and for building the assets, capabilities, and self-reliance of the poor and marginalized sectors as actors in their own development. The letter C, when in terms of the bullet number 5, this is to be read as the engage the business sector and impact investors as transformational partners in co-creating social enterprise and inclusive business models, proper investments in value chains, innovative corporate social responsibility programs, and platforms for building ethical and fair markets. So generally, we just included the words that would define each item. So letter D in the item bullet number 6, this is to engage the local, national governments and intergovernmental bodies at the sub-regional, regional, and global levels to work for an enabling policy environment and ecosystem, and including innovative official development assistance platforms supportive to building a vibrant social enterprise sector as a key element in the pursuit of a post-2015 development agenda. So this in connection with the increasing interest of LGUs in the community where SEs are playing. Next po. Next. And then we agreed on adding the bullet number 7 so that we can engage the schools, the universities, knowledge institution, and media as partners in education, research, and advocacy of social entrepreneurship. So this is in line with the growing interest of the schools and universities in playing with the in partnership with the social entrepreneurship. And then the last one in the paragraph 6, it should be read as we enjoin the UN system to acknowledge or recognize the roles of SEPs as a major vehicle for achieving the sustainable development goals of poverty eradication and transformation of economies. So the next one, the most important objectives and outcomes that should be pursued in the next 3 to 5 years. The first one is to engage the multilateral agencies to support the SEPs. And the outcomes for this is number 1 is to create the ODA platforms to support social entrepreneurship and the development of a vibrant SEP sector in Asia. So this include ADB, WB, EU, ASEAN, SARS, and bilateral platforms. Number 2, engage governments to develop policy, environment, and legislate, and also implement with adequate budget national and local policies to recognize and support SE as strategy for poverty reduction and addressing the inequalities. So under this objective, the outcome should be the bill or the law and the implementing rules and regulations, as well as the ordinances. And then the second to the last is to build on and strengthen existing partnerships, government processes, and programs to support SE as strategy for poverty reduction and addressing the inequalities. So the outcomes for this are MOUs or MOAs with similar-minded government agencies, and to allocate defined budget for social enterprises. And then the last one is to ensure the recognition and participation by the governments of SEPs in poverty eradication and addressing inequality. The outcome is incentive and affirmative actions in the forms of tax incentives for SEPs. And then the last agenda is the most important initiatives, projects at the regional or sub-regional level in the next 1 to 2 years given our proposed objective and outcomes. So the first one is to map all ODA resources for SEs. Next is research to guide SE and ASEAN integration. The definition, popularization, and adoption of SEPs in all political, civil society organizations, businesses, and stakeholders. Research on barriers, incentives, and possible institutional arrangement in support of SEPs. And then curriculum development in mainstreaming SE in K-12 in the Philippines and schools and universities. And mapping of SEs per subsector, and mapping of all SEP supporters, that is the Friends of Fair Trade Air BNB model.
Thank you. Next.
Okay, good afternoon to everyone. This is the output of the, which I call the resilient group, no? Or AKA the beauties and the best, not the beast. Please stand up, all my group mates. Ayan. Naku din naman bitawan ninyo. PCA, they came from Thailand. Thailand, the Jaime B. Ongpin Foundation, BPI Foundation, Green Minds, Milamdek, oh my God, how will I pronounce this? The Dompet Diwapa Foundation, Bina Swadaya Foundation, and of course yours truly from ASCII, Zoraida Libanao. But I won't dwell on the changes or the first two activities, the changes on the SEAL Conference Asia draft conference declaration because of the time limit given by the debonair Professor Chua. And the no objection rule he has set a while ago. So let me go straight to that did not hear me. So let me go straight to the number 3 task, which is setting objectives, outcomes in the next 3 to 5 years. We have actually identified several things or issues relating to disaster and disaster management at that, such as the culture of savings, values formation, resilient crops, buffer zones, integrated approach, self-sufficiency, insurance, livelihood recovery, DRM or disaster risk management training and business continuity plan, reducing risk, financing, network building, in-kind collateral. This is one example I think from Thailand, if I am not mistaken. Yeah, in-kind collateral and trees planting. Towards the end, we decided to categorize the initiatives according to the levels of communities, institutions or organizations, and then, of course, resource institution. Well, I forgot to mention my resource institution, OICO credit, but it is intended to be a special mention, ma'am. And of course, Ma'am Carla and Ma'am Melby. No? In terms of the communities, what we set as the objectives are, number 1, capacitating the poor through disaster risk reduction, values education at that, and then culture of savings and insurance. And then also number 2 is adapting sustainable production technologies or sustainable agriculture, resilient crops as mentioned by the Green Minds. And then building buffer zones also mentioned by Green Minds. Example is planting of mangroves. And in the level of institutions or organizations, or the social enterprises at that, we would like to promote income-generating projects with environmental and sustainable or farm production and trees as examples. And we would also want to develop affordable insurance products because speaking from my heart, the insurance products in the Philippines, I hope there is no government, or I hope there is a government agency here that could relate this to the specific government agency in charge of insurance, the Agricultural Guarantee Fund Pool and the Philippine Crop Insurance Corporation, that we would have to have affordable insurance products and responsive insurance companies at that, or agencies, And then we would also like to develop affordable savings products suited to the poor's conditions, such as the in-kind collateral mentioned by the debonair from Thailand. And in the levels of the resource institutions, we would suggest that they have or promote multi-stakeholder conferences to assess and prepare the SEPs. And in terms of the initiatives and projects, we suggest that they define, or we define the meaning of social enterprises in the region. Because they said there are different definitions of social enterprises in each region. Then we would also like to have a multi-stakeholder conference to assess and prepare, and then adaptation or adoption of recommendations provided in the Business Risk Assessment and Management Climate Change Impact commissioned by BPI Foundation. You can visit the website WWF. Hindi po yun yung wrestling, WWF And then, publication, dissemination of lessons on resilient SEs, ISEA and partner networks in Asia. And then one suggested that we have a personnel exchange program.
Ano ba dito yung
Not just, not in times of not during the disaster itself. And my message, I know I am already, okay. My message is, yesterday and I think today, I heard our Korean friends mention about happiness. And I really like the way they use happiness. And we Filipinos are also known for being happy, even at times of disaster. No? Selfie din pag sa poste ng Meralco, kahit nakaano na tayo, nakalubog sa baha. No? So I would like to say that we should always hope for the best and prepare for the worst. In other words, sabi nga namin mga Tagalog at mga Bisaya, dasal-dasal din tayo, day. Okay, thank you very much.